So here we are with our second chapter and second lecture on interpersonal communication. There is a third chapter that really it's primarily about interpersonal, and it's the one on conflict. We won't be getting into that until the third unit for the third week. So this really finishes out this week talking about interpersonal. As I say, it's our second chapter. We're going to talk today about stages and processes of relationships. Now, this is part of the model that your book has on the stages of and the process of relationships and what they go through. So relationships begin, and we're really thinking a lot here of intimate relationships. And intimate can be romantic, but it might actually be a friendship as well, right? So so relationships begin with contact. I mean, it's just that, right? It very rarely are, well, I guess in any relationship, even when it's been prearranged for us, which is pretty rare, I guess blind dates, that sort of thing, it begins with contact, seeing each other, interacting. And notice that even as we begin this first stage of the relationship, we always have the option to exit, right? That's something that at any point we can choose to exit a relationship. But in the contact phase, perceptual as you see the person, interaction as you say, oh, hi there, right? This early stage. And based on that, you may decide that they're weird or this doesn't feel right or I'm not interested or not today, and move on, right? It remains a very impersonal relationship, as we've discussed. Or you may decide that you want to move forward. And if you move forward, you now move into the stage called involvement. That's what this model calls it, is involvement. And there's different models of relationships. One that we discussed a lot, interpersonal, is Knapp's model relationship development, which we're not doing here, but I say it to say that there are multiple models that emphasize many of these same steps. That we begin by first meeting somebody, and then we go through this phase that here what they call is involvement. And one of the important things that goes on in this phase is that first bullet point there, which is testing. So we meet this person, they seem nice, we're attracted to them socially, we're attracted to them physically, whatever it is. And so when I say socially, just that they seem like a nice person to be around, right? And so we decide, oh, we'll spend a little more time with them. And so you chat with them a little bit and you see if you have the same sort of conversational patterns. Do you have similar sense of humor, similar sets of values, similar outlook on the world, similar sorts of attitudes? Because we know from research that opposites don't really attract. At the end of the day, opposites don't attract. We're drawn to people who are like us. It's the principle of homophily. So it's homo meaning same and phily meaning affection or love. So homophily, right? That we're drawn to people who are like us, really. When people are not, any way that somebody's not like us, we can pick out really easily, but it's hard to recognize all the ways somebody is in fact like us. So anyway, so in this testing phase, we're just seeing how things go. And we're not really officially testing, but you're getting to know them. And each interaction is a sort of test. Again, do you share the same sense of humor, same values? Do you respond to the same things in the same way? Right? That would be testing. And this leads then to intensifying. And intensifying is like, intense! It doesn't have to be that. It sounds that way. It just means that we are going sort of more deep. I mean, we used some of that metaphor about depth of relationships. That it's intensifying because we're sharing more things, more types of things, perhaps slightly more personal things maybe. And those personal things could be experiences. They could just be beliefs we don't share very often or we just don't feel comfortable talking about very much. So we're intensifying. And during this phase, it may turn out that, oh, never mind, and decide to exit stage left, right? That's what we do. Yeah, that arrow is for stage left. Yeah, and so there is testing and then intensifying. We can always leave, but what we're doing here is we're just figuring out, how does this work? Oh, you like the kind of music? Me too. Oh, you think it's funny? Me too. I mean, it's a lot of that sort of stuff. The next phase is one of intimacy. And like I said, most models emphasize contact, exploring and intensifying, and then moving into this phase of intimacy. This is a pretty standard sort of model. So here it's interpersonal commitment, just the idea that as opposed to so if it's a friend maybe that you met at work and then you no longer work the same shifts, or one of you no longer works there, you're in the stage of intimacy if then you have a commitment to like stay in touch with each other outside of that. And a commitment isn't like, in writing necessarily, but you feel that sense of like, oh, I don't see them at work anymore. I should totally text them. I should call them. We should make plans to get together. Right? So that's what interpersonal commitment's about, because there is a social bonding that's going on. And again, at some point in this phase, something could happen and we could decide to exit. Right? We could always decide to exit a relationship. We also could find ourselves, and notice those arrows that are between each of those circles. If you look at them, they show that this sort of, we can start moving back and forth, right? We can be developing our commitment, and then we might sort of start backing out of it. We end up more like we have a little more distance between us, move into back into some sort of testing phase, because we're just not as committed and bonded to each other anymore. Okay? And then we get to this last set of phases. So we've bonded. We're to get, say it's intimate bonding because you're a couple, you're friends. And then we get to these last three bubbles, and I want to focus on them a little more. So we look at this first bubble, and it's deterioration. Because sometimes things happen. You just, as it says, the bottom of those two is interpersonal deterioration. You just aren't feeling, there's problems. You're arguing, you're not getting along, you see things differently, I don't know. And there's also interpersonal deterioration or dissatisfaction. You're just not feeling good about this anymore. You don't feel good when you're with them. You two get along okay, but you don't feel good when you're with them. It doesn't feel right for you, right? Now you may decide to move back some, right? This may fix, you go back, right? But we talk about that we might end up fixing. So we move sideways here for a moment into repair, right? We work on the issues that we're having personally. We work on issues in the relationship. That's repair, right? Or we might decide that we need to find a way to start separating, right? And that can be separated by not seeing each other, by now socially and publicly avoiding each other, right? So when we pull back again, we look at the full model, we see that again, you can move back and forth through the stages, but they're the basic steps there of meeting, getting to know and become acquainted, being pretty firm, some sort of struggle deterioration, which is common to all relationships, and we can either engage in repair or we can move toward dissolution. Right? So that's the basic model that the book is giving us. I want to get into a couple other theories that your book touches on. I want to explain and expound, or really expand on them. The first of them is social exchange theory, which I find endlessly interesting. It's actually a theory that's drawn from economics. So, wow, if you thought this class wasn't exciting, try economics. No, I'm kidding. Economics is good stuff. Okay, so like I say, it's based on economics. The idea that in every relationship there are rewards. Rewards are that in this relationship you have somebody you can share things with. That in this relationship you they do things for you. I mean, those things don't have to be anything physical or sexual, certainly, because it can be, but also they do things for you, like they give you a ride to the airport when you have to leave town. Not that any of us should be on planes right now because, again, pandemic. But there are certain rewards to it. A reward might also be that you're not alone, right? And you like having somebody to do things with because you don't like going to dinner alone, or movies alone. Again, not that you should be doing any of those, but okay, right? But those are all, right, those are rewards, the things that we get out of the relationship that are positive. Relationships have cost. First off, a relationship always has the cost of we have less freedom, right? Even if there are friends, you're not supposed to ditch your friends. You're supposed to stay with your friends, right? So we have less freedom when we're in relationships. Costs are when you're in a relationship with somebody. There's the reward. You're having a hard time. They share that with you. A cost is when they're having a hard time, you have to share it with them. And you might be very glad to do that, but at the same time, it can be taxing. You have to be there for them. Maybe you have to help them with things that they need help with. So you get a reward of them helping you, but there's cost because you have to help them. Maybe these are relationships, especially when we think about romantic relationships or relationships in families, but social exchange theory doesn't really do as much with families. necessarily. There are costs because they don't do certain things around the house, and so you're stuck doing them, right? So those are costs. So when we put all those together, we have the worth of the relationship, and it's the rewards of the relationship minus the costs. It's a little bit like a column of of what's good about this relationship, a column what's bad of this relationship, right? And we subtract one from the other, and that tells us the worth of the relationship. This sounds very cold, but in fact, this is what we do in many ways. We do this. We may not do it on paper, but all the time. We think, I mean, I like spending time with them, I guess, but oh my gosh, they're just be a friend, right? Oh my gosh, they're such a drag, and they whine, it just drags me down sometimes. Okay. Or I like doing things with them, like being with them, but they constantly are needing help. Okay, so there's a lot of cost, right? So you have the worth of the relationship, and it's rewards minus cost, and so that worth might be positive or negative. Keep that concept in mind here as we go to this, right? So we have an expectation for a relationship, right? We expect certain things from this relationship, and the type of relationship we have. The type of friendship, if it's an acquaintance, we expect certain things. If it's a close friendship, other things. Romantic relationships, we expect more from, and maybe even the type of relationship, if you just expect it's sort of a passing thing versus something you want to be long term, right? So we have expectation for that relationship. And those expectations are unique to each person. Each person is wanting and expecting something different out of those different relationships. It varies by person, right? And it's affected a lot by our experiences, because based on our experiences, we start expecting, again, you learn in friendships and also romantic relationships as a child, into your adolescence and teens, and into your adult years, that yeah, you've got to make time for these relationships, right? And so making time for a relationship, you might go and do something else by yourself or with other people, might be a sort of cost, but you start learning, because at the time you were 11 and you kept blowing off your best friend to go and do something else. After all, they weren't your best friend anymore, so you learn there's an expectation. Sometimes I have to give up my freedom to spend time with my best friend to nurture that relationship, right? Those are expectations. So that worth that we talked about in the previous screen, if the worth is greater than the expectation, we expect the relationship will have certain rewards, but it's going to have certain costs. If the worth is greater, meaning overall it's giving us more, in the end we're getting more of the relationship than we thought we would after we adjust for cost, then we're going to be satisfied in our relationship, right? So being satisfied in a relationship comes from those times when the worth of the relationship, again, the worth being the rewards minus the costs, the worth is greater than what we expected. So we know we have to give up certain freedoms to spend time with this person, but in this relationship, oh my gosh, it's I still am getting, I mean, there's certain costs, but it's still better than I ever expected, right? Therefore you're satisfied. But if you find the worth is less than your expectations, you just think, man, I feel like I'm just always putting into this relationship and I'm not getting much out of it, right? I feel like I should be getting more, right? I feel like I should be getting more, which is to say I expect more. When that happens, that means the worth is less than your expectations. And when you're in that case, then that means you are unsatisfied in your relationship. So we go from satisfaction to stability. Right? So stability in social exchange theory has to do with what we have. It's a comparison of the relationship we're in, what we have, and the alternatives we see. That would be the metaphorical other fish in the sea, right? There are always other relationships out there we can be in. We can always be in different friendships. We can always be in different romantic relationships. We can develop different relationships within our family and spend time with them, right? So if our current relationship is better than what we see as alternatives that we have out there, then our relationship is stable. By the way, we may not be satisfied, but we may feel there's not a better alternative. This is why people stay in unhealthy, toxic, and or abusive relationships, right? They may not be satisfied in them, but they've come to believe there's nothing better out there for them, or that being alone is not acceptable, right? It's not a good alternative. And when that happens, then what they have currently is better than alternatives, and the relationship is stable, even though it's terrible for them, right? But hopefully, many times, yeah, the relationship is meeting our expectations more than, right? So we're satisfied, and that means the current relationship looks better than other alternatives we have out there. So our relationship is stable. And conversely, if the relationship we're currently in doesn't seem as good as other alternatives, that relationship is unstable, right? If you have a friendship with somebody and it's just sort of, it's just like it's a pain, and you see there are other people you could spend more time with as your friends, you'd enjoy that more, you're probably going to let that first friendship sort of die away as you then focus on another friendship. And certainly if it's a romantic relationship as well, right? So social exchange theory helps us to think about when and why people are satisfied in relationships and when those relationships are stable. From social exchange theory, we move then to equity theory. And so equity theory focuses on, as you see here, equity. And equity itself is like equality, but not. It's not exactly, right? So when you think about equity, let's say when my nephews were young, and all my nephews now are adults, and some of them have children, and they're police officers and farmers and whatever. But let's say when they were younger. Let's say when they were younger, I took two of my nephews, their brothers, Ty and Kale. Let's say I took them to a carnival, back when it was safe to go to carnivals. Okay, if I were to give each of them $20 and say, there you go, it's your $20 to spend here at the carnival, do as you like, right? And they both had brought their money from home with them, right? So that means that Ty would go into his piggy bank and probably pull out $10, and Kale go into his piggy bank and pull out lint, because Ty just was a good saver, but boy, that money sort of burned a hole in Kale's pocket, right? Okay, so if I took them and they brought their money, that means that Ty has, his $20 I gave him, and the 10 he brought with him, and Kale has the 0 he brought with him and the 20 I gave him. So if I treat them equally, or I give them both the $20, well, after a while, they've ridden the rickety roller coaster, they've gone in the House of Horrors, right? They've had funnel cake, and they've blown through 20 bucks. Well, Ty still has $10 left, right? Ty still has $10 left, and Kale has 0. So if I treat them equally, then Ty can go and ride the rickety roller coaster again, right? Or the topsy-turvy, spinning out of control, and Kale has to sit there on a bench crying, right? But I treated them equally. I gave them both $20, right? Equity would be more like saying, oh, okay, well, Ty starts out with $10, so Kale, I'm gonna give you, 25. Or maybe I say, boys, leave leave the money at home. I could make you bring your money with you, but I don't want you doing that, because I'm going to adjust for the disparity between you, right? Equality means treating people equally. Equity says you start out with differences, right? And so I'm going to make adjustments to allow for those differences, right? So it's an idea of fairness more broadly, as opposed to just highly legalistic, we all get the same. Equity says we all get according to our needs. If you think about the support that we give people, like with SNAP, which is a support for food, we used to call it food stamps. It's not that, but now it's called SNAP. I mean, I guess I could be annoyed as a taxpayer. I don't get that money. Right, but see, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to afford my groceries. So there are other people who can't, and so it is fair that other people get the assistance that I don't get. See, that's fair, because I don't need that help. So it would be wasted on me, though I appreciate it. It'd be wasted on me the way where somebody else desperately needs it. Right? So it's fairness more broadly. Right? So the question about equity theory isn't so much about there's costs and rewards to a relationship, which is what social exchange talks about. In equity theory, it's about, is the other person putting into the relationship in a way that's equitable? And equitable is going to depend upon the specific persons and relationship. Are they giving the same amount I am? Is not the question. See, that would be equality. Are they giving the same I am? No. Are they putting in a way that's equitable? A way that they're able to? And maybe even, are they putting it in a way they're able to right now, like at this moment? So for instance, I'm going to share this with you. Back in April, completely unrelated to COVID, my mother-in-law passed away very unexpectedly. We had, she was sort of feeling sick, went to the hospital, thought maybe she's dehydrated. Within 12 hours, we'd lost her. It was a very quick, very sad thing, very hard for all of us to go through. So here, my partner, my wife, is grieving the loss of her parent. Something I've experienced myself. So she may not be giving as much around the household for a while. She may not be putting to the relationship the same way. But it's fair that she does less during a time of intense grief. When the children have been home and I've been trying to homeschool my daughter and do my job, it means that I'm working from home. I don't have as much time, or I don't have the time and energy to put into doing things like getting dinner on the table. So my wife has sort of picked up that slack, or we used to share it a lot, because I'm having to do more time working at home, which is a lot of juggling going on while trying to like homeschool and care for my son, who is too young. He's 2.5, right? So there's no homeschooling him, just really keeping him fed and sort of happy. So Ivy's not looking for, I hope, am I giving enough, but am I giving equitably? Am I giving as I'm able to? That's what equity theory is about, is what is it that I'm able to expect of this person, or are they putting in a way that's fair, right? And if so, then equity leads to satisfaction, right? In social exchange theory, equity was about what's this relationship costing or rewarding me? How's it compared to what I'm expecting? That's whether or not I'm satisfied. And this one is just, do I feel like the other person is putting it in a way that's equitable? So I'm hoping as you hear these theories, you think about them, and it helps you to reflect about relationships that you're in or have been in, friendships, romantic relationships, to think about when they've been rewarding and not, and how we judge them, and just get a sense of what we're doing, and also to ask yourself, am I being fair? If you feel like you're a bad person, you're not happy, looking at these might help you understand why it is you're not happy, and it may even let you know that really it's okay and it's understandable. Okay, I hope that's been edifying to you, both academically and personally, and I'll see you in the next lecture, which will be picking up on interpersonal and really interpersonal, I guess we'll pick back up with again in week 3.